When We Walk By, Forgotten Humanity, Broken Systems, and the Role We Can Each Play in Ending Homelessness in America, by Kevin F. Adler and Donald W. Burns, with Amanda Banh and Andrijana Bilbija. Narrated by Kevin F. Adler. Published by North Atlantic Books. Dedicated to Mark Stephen Adler, my beloved uncle, who managed to send a birthday card nearly every year of his 30-plus years living on and off the streets in Santa Cruz, California. This book was published within a week of November 1st, 2023, on what would have been his 70th birthday. It is for you, Mark, and for the 582,462 other uncles, aunts, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons, daughters, friends, and neighbors experiencing homelessness each night in the United States. May we each take time to hear your stories and act before it's too late. Preface. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. That man, that woman, that child is my brother or my sister. Mother Teresa. Everyone is someone's somebody. And Mark was my uncle, the most family-oriented member of my extended family, the uncle who shared my love of super burritos, was easy to talk to, remembered every birthday, and always sent a card. The year before he died, Mark mailed me an eagle bandana for my birthday, along with his go-to staple of a Hallmark card for a beloved nephew, always with just his first name carefully added in block letters. Mark also suffered from schizophrenia and lived on and off the streets for over 30 years, bouncing between transitional housing, shelters, and the streets of Santa Cruz, California. He would disappear for months at a time, only to reemerge in the form of a collect call from a payphone. If I happened to pick up the call, he would ask me how my brother and I were doing, and then ask to speak to my dad, usually followed by a request for $20 or $50. If we were in touch during the holidays, Mark would come over for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner as the guest of honor. Toward the end of the meal, bellies full and satisfied, we would all talk about our desire to spend more time together as a family. But that rarely happened before Mark would disappear again. One day, during my sophomore year of college, my dad called me crying. He said he had some bad news. Mark had passed away. His body was found alone in the room of a transitional housing facility where he had been staying. He was 50 years old. We held a small funeral for Mark in Santa Cruz, not far from the streets where he often slept. The memorial service was the only time I ever saw my grandpa cry. He slowly stepped up to the pulpit, stood with my grandma at his side, and spoke a few words about his late son. He asked the officiant to play Danny Boy. As the Irish ballad began, my grandpa, a deeply reserved World War II veteran who rarely showed any emotion, wept. A few years went by. I headed to the University of Cambridge for graduate school. At some point, I took a 6-month leave of absence to return home to be by my mom's side in the intensive care unit as she battled stage 4 breast cancer. She was the strongest and kindest person I ever knew. After she passed away, I returned to Cambridge to finish my master's degree in sociology and then moved back to Livermore, California to get my abandoned childhood home ready for rental. After 8 emotionally grueling months of sorting through my mom's belongings, meeting with contractors, and spending a lot of time alone, I was exhausted. So once the house was successfully cleaned, cleared, and rented out, I went backpacking in Southeast Asia, lived in Oaxaca for a year on a Rotary scholarship, and began turning my dissertation into my first book, which was published in 2015 as Natural Disasters as a Catalyst for Social Capital. Finally, I moved to Silicon Valley to pursue my dreams as a social entrepreneur, and I dove headfirst into the education technology space, co-founding 2 startups. I believed in the work my team and I were doing, but I also began to feel a growing tension between my own lofty ideals of trying to make the world a better place and my sense of disconnect from the people I wanted to serve. With a hunger to be hands-on at this formative early stage of my career, it felt a bit discombobulating to spend much of my day tinkering with buttons and drop-downs on a website and trying to network with wealthy investors and mid-level software engineers, all while walking by people who were living and dying on the streets in front of me, en route to my office, apartment, and social events. Most of the time, I would just walk by. But occasionally, I would stop, or at least slow down for a moment and look up. On these occasions, I might mutter a quick hello or awkward sorry. If I was trying to be especially considerate, I might offer a fleeting half smile or nod. I was not exactly comfortable interacting with my neighbors experiencing homelessness in this season of my life. Still, my thoughts would often remain with the person as my body continued forward. In my mind's eye, I would look closer than I allowed myself to look moments ago. I would try to see their faces, glance into their eyes, and imagine that they too were someone's somebody, someone's father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter, or maybe even some kid's beloved uncle. Back then, nearly a decade ago, when I took the time to see people experiencing homelessness at all, I would see them as them, not really part of us. They were problems to be solved, not people to be loved. If I thought much about them, I would usually feel sad, then guilty, then frustrated. How did they get like this? What could I do? Why was there seemingly no progress being made, despite tens of millions of dollars being spent every single year by the local government? And why did I feel so helpless? Did others know what to do? I would consider these questions for a few moments, then move on to my next meeting or dinner or whatever. That began to change in November 2013. After spending Thanksgiving with my relatives near Santa Cruz, my dad and I decided to stop by Mark's gravesite on our way home. It was the first time we visited since Mark's funeral 8 years earlier. We found his small marker and sat down together amid the rolling green lawns. Sitting there with my dad, I began to wonder more about the part of Mark's life that I never saw as a kid. Where did he usually end up after my dad dropped him off at the Greyhound bus station in Livermore or drove him back to Santa Cruz? How did he spend his time? Did he panhandle? Did he work? Did he have enough food and water? Was he ever arrested? Did he have a caseworker? Did he self-medicate? What sorts of things did he think about? And every few years, when he would go off his medications for schizophrenia and disappear for months at a time, did he know that his family dearly missed him? Sitting at the gravesite, surrounded by thousands of other markers, I began to ask my dad some of these questions. What resulted was a powerful father-son conversation on the life, death, and legacy of my beloved uncle, his younger brother. Toward the end of the conversation, I finally asked a question that had been lingering on my mind. Dad, why did you feel it was important to have a gravestone marker for Uncle Mark? We haven't exactly been frequent visitors here. He responded, I guess I just felt that it was fitting for my brother to finally have a permanent place to rest, just for himself. Mark spent most of his life on the streets, but now in death he has what he never had in life. I was moved by what my dad said, as well as the poignant notion of a permanent plot of land for a man whose life was characterized by impermanence. But I also reflected on how little the marker actually told us, or anyone else who might walk by, about who my uncle was and what he meant to our family. The simple marker only offered his name, birth and death dates, and a dash in between. All the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?